Hello and welcome to today's grand incident. Pokemon is one of those series that has had quite an impact when it first released, and still manages to stay in that limelight even to this day. It's certainly not a stretch to call Pokemon's main mascot, Pikachu, one of the most recognizable characters ever created. Pokemon is also a series that has, much to the IP holder's dismay, inspired many fans to try their hand at making their own adventures, ranging from small-scale changes to whole new maps and Pokemon to use. Touhou has a handful of inserts into these fan-crafted journeys for sure, but if you were to ask someone familiar with this specific group of Pokemon games, there's one that will likely come to mind first. That's what I wanted to talk about today. Touhou's most well-known Pokemon-inspired adventure, the game known as Touhou Puppet Dance Performance. The game was released on December 30th, 2014 by Gensokyo Focus Lens, and is a Pokemon-style RPG featuring just about every character who has ever appeared in the Touhou series between Touhou 1 and Touhou 15. Before I get into the game, there's a few things to mention. First is that a year after the initial release, an expansion was created. This is known in the West as Shard of Dreams. Everything said in this video will apply to this expansion, but it may not apply to the base game. The Shard of Dreams expansion has new content and balance changes, and while I won't be listing them here, I will be leaving a link to what they are down below. The second is that this video will be assuming you have played, or at least know how Pokemon games work, meaning I won't be explaining any mechanics that work exactly the same in both games, such as same type attack bonus and type effectiveness. With all that said, time to get into the game. After you select your character and name, you'll be dropped off at the Hakude Shrine, and from here you're free to look around. A little to the east, there's a guy you can talk to who will ask you who your favorite Touhou character is, and you'll be given the choice of every character who appears in the game. If you back out of your choice, the man will pick one for you at random. Eventually, your free roaming will have you come face to face with a small version of the character you chose or had chosen for you. From here, Kirisami Marisa will show up and inform you that what's in front of you is known as a puppet, and then lend you her own puppet to fight it. I'm sure it's pretty obvious, but that character you chose at the start of the game is your starter. This means that you're allowed to start with any puppet you want, and this comes with a few benefits, but I'll get into that in a second. Marissa will take you back to the shrine and introduce you to Kochiya Sanae and Hakude Reimu to inform you about the puppet incident. Once you've had a chance to meet the important characters, and Sanae, you'll be told to head to the nearby village to look for clues to help resolve the incident. That's about it for an intro. From here you'll start your journey through Gensokyo. The game is pretty on the ball with linear progression for a while, which is fine since it's the beginning of the game. So in the meantime, let me get into the game's mechanics, starting with, well, your starter. All puppet stats are given an individual value, or rank, that ranges from E- to S. Your starter puppet will have an S rank in every stat. Notice how one of the numbers here is blue. This is tied to your puppet's emblem. A puppet's emblem is random, and the stat it's tied to will be raised by 10% with no negative trade-off. I won't be explaining the stats themselves, but I will mention that FO stands for focus, and SP stands for spread. Moves that use the focus attack stat are written in red, and moves that use the spread attack are written in blue. One last thing to mention here is the ability to see what your puppet's stats will look like at level 50, which while neat, isn't something to stress about if it's your first time playing. Your starter comes with one more benefit. You can see it in the bottom left corner of the puppet. This is the heart mark. The main benefit of this mark is that it allows your starter to use the held item it comes with. This is the Dream Shard. The Dream Shard will increase all stats by 10%, except HP, if the puppet holding it has a heart mark. It's an item that rewards your favoritism. The heart mark is used for another feature in the game, but I'll get to that a bit later. That covers your starter benefits. But what about other puppets? Well, let me tell you how to get more. Puppets are obtained by capturing them in a type of sealing thread. The idea of this is what you'd expect, but it does work a bit differently. Puppets can be sealed at any point in the battle, and if you knock them out while the seal is active, you capture it. Pretty simple stuff. The only thing to note is that a sealing thread isn't guaranteed to work, and if you take too long to knock the puppet out, the seal can break. They aren't very expensive, so don't worry too much about burning through them. Speaking of money, it also works a bit differently. You don't gain any money when you win a battle. You also don't lose any when you lose. Instead, items will drop after fights that you're expected to sell. This is the only way to make money. Every puppet in the game has their own set of items at varying rarities that can be dropped, with different odds for higher levels. These odds aren't something the game is going to tell you, so you'll have to look it up yourself. Get used to me saying this. I've already talked about a lot of the mechanics, but I haven't even mentioned how the battle system works. This is mostly because it's exactly what you'd expect. I already said I won't be explaining anything that works exactly like Pokemon, and that's 99% of the battle system. Puppet Dance Performance does have something unique to it though, and that's how it handles status conditions. There are multiple status ailments in the game, and a puppet can be afflicted by 2 at a time. For example, you can be burned while also being blinded. Some conditions double up too. My favorite example is how paralysis works. A paralyzed puppet will have its speed reduced, but if you inflict paralysis again, the status becomes shocked, which retains the speed reduction, but now also guarantees all attacks will hit the afflicted puppet. Not every condition doubles up, and if you want to know what every condition does, then you'll have to look that up. While I said I won't explain type effectiveness, I should mention that the types in the game are pretty different. Some characters' types, and even type matchups in general, are obvious, but if you don't know what all the types in the game are, then it will take some time to learn. Now this isn't something you have to look up, but it is one I wouldn't blame you for doing. There are 17 types in the game, and a lot of puppets have 2 types, and the best way to know what those are is to own the puppet yourself. There are a few tells in a battle for a puppet's type that can help, provided you know what type each tell represents. The first is the little magic crystal a puppet comes out of is colored the same as their first type. This isn't the most convenient way to check, but it's all you have for a while. The other tell happens later in the game once puppets start coming in different styles. When they emerge from their crystal, they'll have an effect around them showing their first type. Since both of these only show you one type, they aren't as reliable as just owning the puppet, but it does help. Backing up a bit, I mentioned something about a different style. To better explain that, I just have to cover one more area. EXP is awarded at the end of every fight, and all puppets in your party will receive a share, with no way to turn this off. Puppets that participate in the battle without getting knocked out will receive double, and any puppets that went into the battle already knocked out won't receive any. Neat little quirk of this is that puppets that faint in the battle can revive if they hit a level up afterward. Alongside EXP, all puppets will receive PP. PP is used for a few different things, all of which can be accessed right from the puppet's menu. There's a few different options in here. You can increase a puppet's stats, learn new moves, and even change to their other ability. The last option is the main one I want to talk about though, the style change. This option will unlock when a puppet reaches level 30. There are 4 main styles: power, speed, defense, and assist. And each puppet in the game can choose between 2 of the 4 options. There's also an extra style that every puppet can change into. This style is exactly as it says. It's an extra style that doesn't always follow a set rule, and they also tend to change a puppet's type into something wacky. If you count the normal form, each puppet has 4 different styles, effectively making 503 different puppets in the game. PP is a great mechanic that simplifies a lot of the headache of team building, so while it's unfortunate that you can't change the way EXP works, at least the game makes up for it in other areas. That covers almost everything related to the gameplay, so let me get back to the story. After a certain point, the game will stop telling you where to go and instead tell you to explore all over. You can go just about anywhere you want, but not everything will be immediately accessible. This is a good time to head to locations to find any puppets you encounter that you were interested in, provided you know where to find them. This actually brings up my first issue with the game. There is no way to know where you can find a puppet in the game. Early on, you're given a book that records puppets that you caught with some text and a cost value. This would be a better item if it recorded puppets you've seen and shows you where to get them. Now, I'm not about to go on about how a massive Touhou-themed fan game would expect you to know about Touhou, but knowledge only goes so far here. I'm running around an ice cave because I'm certain I can find a Letty puppet, and there's a 5% chance to find myself getting mean mugged by Five Eyes. But what if I find Letty first and just leave? I never knew the Eyeball Gang was there at all. To be fair, this isn't the only place you can find them, but it's also not like this is the only example of this. I assume the reason for no search function is to avoid spoiling map locations, but who knows. While it is a bit inconvenient, it isn't nearly as bad as some of the stuff Pokemon games ask you to go through, and I'm sure a few examples have already come to mind just by me saying that. You can obtain every available puppet before finishing the story, so that can help. But this is another one of those things that you'd probably want to look up. I'd also like to mention that there's quite a number of areas that have a very Lambeth type of map design, making revisiting areas a bit of a pain. I don't want to turn this portion into wine time, but these are a few things that you'll likely notice yourself. In fact, there's one thing I want to mention here since I'm sure you could have expected it once I explained how EXP works. You will very quickly find yourself around 5 to 10 levels above everything in the game. In my first ever playthrough, I swapped puppets pretty frequently, so it never felt huge. But this time around, I had decided on my team early on, and the gap got worse. I would like to mention here that I barely did any battles against wild puppets, so most of the extra EXP came from capturing. But even then, it doesn't take long before all the trainer fights turn trivial. Important fights will match you for a while, but you will eventually see the same problem here. Although the important characters do have good puppets and AI. I find that the level gap doesn't make a huge difference in these fights, but to be honest, I can't tell if that's because of the nature of the game, or because I'm not exploiting type effectiveness while my opponent is. Okay, that's enough complaining. Moving on. I'm not going to spoil the story of the game, as even with some of these issues, it's fun to go through. For that reason, I'm going to jump ahead. Once you defeat the final boss, you'll be granted access to the post-game. The post-game opens up more locations on your map, and grants access to some new features. There's also a lot of rematches you can do, and this time around they have some extra styles in their lineups, which if you were playing the game without looking up any puppets types, is a bit of a miserable experience. Before I get into some of these new features, I want to revisit the Heart Mark. Fairly early into the game, you'll unlock the costume shop. This location will let you change your puppet's outfit. Each puppet has an alternate color and an alternate costume. I don't know every recolor or reference, but a lot of these alts look really nice regardless. Now where the Heart Mark comes in. Any puppet with one can use a special costume, the wedding outfit. It's just like it sounds. You can put your puppet in a wedding dress or a tuxedo. Now you might be thinking that it's a bit silly to only allow your starter puppet to access this, but it's actually possible to obtain a heart mark on another puppet. A puppet can obtain a heart mark by gaining a total of 99 levels. This is actually impossible during the main game, as the lowest level you can catch a puppet is 2, and the max level is 100. So how do you do it? Well, first, you'll need to return to the Scarlet Devil Mansion. Once there, you'll be tasked with defeating the Elite Four of a kind, and once this is completed, you'll unlock Reincarnation. Reincarnation will allow you to reset a puppet to level 1 while changing their emblem and rank at the cost of all their PP. This also resets the puppet's reinforced stats and style. This is how you gain 99 levels on puppets, but it's cumulative, so you don't have to go from 1 to 100. You could go from 1 to 20, then reset and do it again. There's a lot here, but I promise it's simpler than it looks, so let me explain starting from the top. First is the puppet you want to reincarnate. For slots 2 and 3, you set puppets that you want to use to pass on ranks. Slot 4 is for picking the puppet's new emblem, and slot 5 is for deciding how you want to roll the puppet's ranks. You start with the emblem marks and 1 rank stone, with 6 of them being in the nearby ice cave, and 1 more tied to a side quest. Honestly, the stones in the ice cave are useless, and you'll only be using the one you start with and the one you obtain from the quest. The quest in question is a trip to Kassen's house, where she'll ask you to find 4 of her lost items scattered across the map. You don't get hints, you're just told to go check the whole map for some items. As stubborn as I was about not using the type chart, I did not even for a second think about running this errand without help. Backtracking to reincarnation, the first stone, the Omega Stone, will retain the reincarnating puppet's ranks, and Kassen's Stone, the Rainbow Stone, will guarantee that 5 of the 6 ranks your puppet reincarnates with will come from the puppets in slot 2 and 3. And given that your starter already has all S ranks, it won't take long to get another like it. Now at this point you might be wondering, why bother with this feature when the main game is finished? Well, let me show you. One of the new areas you can go to is the Yakumo residence, and once you defeat Yukari in a match, you'll unlock netplay. That's right, you can battle other real people in this game. You can set your rules and music and look for an opponent. Now, I'm gonna be honest, I'm not into competitive battling, so I am not the guy to ask here about this one. But I will be leaving a link to the game's wiki page, which has a lot of links and resources available should you be interested in this aspect yourself. Aside from those areas, you're mostly just running to the new areas and even some older ones to find the changes. And again, I don't want to spoil anything here, so I'll just say that the story isn't quite finished yet. Well, once you do finish off the post-game story, you'll reach the post-post game. This isn't much different from the post-game, some extra rematches and a couple new events. But again, the game doesn't tell you where those are, so you're expected to run through everything again playing Spot the Difference. As far as I can tell, the biggest addition here is the Human Village Tournament. This is a Bring 6 Choose 3 style tournament where all puppets are forced to level 50, unless they're below it. The way it works is that every 10 matches has a group of characters it will pick as an opponent, with every 5th trainer being set, as well as matches 48 to 50. While the opponents you get can be random, their teams aren't, so you can at least prepare for every scripted fight. There's 50 matches total, and the game forces you to save, so you can't cheese a win streak, and every 10 wins you're rewarded good items. This tournament is the true endgame goal of solo play, and it features some battle music that's not anywhere else in the game. If you can manage a 50 win streak, you'll be rewarded a special item called the Boundary Trance. This item is like the Dream Shard, only instead of a 10% increase in stats, it's a 100% increase. In other words, it doubles every stat except HP. Something to note about these particular items is that they are not allowed on netplay. and the Boundary Trance will be available from New Game Plus, which I didn't actually test myself, but I'm told is correct. And given that you get such an item after you've exhausted everywhere you could really use it, it makes sense that it would carry over. There is at least one more area with a unique battle theme to revisit, but aside from that, I think that covers all the endgame content in the game. Touhou Puppet Dance Performance is an incredible game. It emulates Pokemon well, while also implementing some of its own features, and making so many of the tedious parts of raising Pokemon incredibly quick to do and simple to understand. The art in the game is beautiful, from the character portraits to the puppet models. Despite what I said about some of the map design, the overall map is actually one of my favorites I've ever seen. The world of Touhou, known as Gensokyo, doesn't have a proper map, but it does have a general idea of some prominent locations, and Puppet Dance Performance does a good job connecting these areas in a way that makes sense for map progression without taking too many creative liberties. I barely mentioned the music. Great mixes of themes with a lot of variety throughout the game. Different areas have different encounter music, so you don't have to listen to the same song every time you get an encounter, although I can't say the same for standard trainer battles. It really isn't hard to see why this game is the most well-known of the Pokemon-style Touhou fan games. I do have my complaints though, as I've already mentioned. A lack of information given to you in the game itself is a big one, as well as the map design being a bit of a headache to run around in. This problem in particular is amplified when you realize that the game wants you to revisit locations multiple times. You can work around these issues by looking them up at least. In fact, there's an English manual with a lot of the info in it that I said wasn't present, so technically it is all included. I'll leave a link to it below so you can check it out. Unfortunately, there isn't really a good way to avoid causing a level gap. And even though I still had some trouble with some fights, I imagine if you looked up every puppet to know their weaknesses, it would be a bit of a breeze to beat. Pokemon players have always been good at making up their own challenges for games when they consider them too easy. So maybe you could try to implement one of those here if you're worried about the difficulty. The positives far outweigh the negatives here for sure. The length of the game is well worth the investment, and there's a lot here for those who just like Touhou, and an extra amount with net play for those who like both Touhou and Pokemon battling. As someone who belongs in the former category, I love seeing all the effort the developers put into getting the characters and areas right. It really was a grand time walking through Gensokyo with miniature versions of the characters I liked while taking in the sights and enjoying the music. Regarding the circle, focus lens, they don't seem to be active anymore. I can't read Japanese, but I can see that most of the links I followed stopped updating around 2016. The only thing I could find was the artist for the game semi-recently posted a sheet of puppet versions of some of the Touhou characters who came out after the game. Can't give you a link to that one though, you'll have to find it yourself. And once you get there, you'll understand why you were on your own with that one. With all that said, time for the rating. Touhou Puppet Dance Performance is quite obviously a rank AQ of a game. Let me explain why. Well, I don't think I really need to explain too much why this is the case this time, but let me go over it. The biggest thing is the reliance on existing Touhou knowledge for certain aspects of the game. While I do say that, that only goes so far with the type chart. This is mostly a thing for finding where puppets are, and for figuring out where to go next outside of aimless wandering. This isn't really unexpected, considering the game features characters all the way from Touhou 1, as well as the characters from the written works, who you'd never know about if you only played the games. In fact, that's where Aki herself comes from. This ranking is intended to give an idea of how much knowledge you should have to get the most out of a game, but not necessarily required to just play. But in this case, I feel like trying to play this one with virtually no knowledge of Touhou would just be way more frustrating than fun. Would you agree or disagree? Let me know what you think. Touhou Puppet Dance Performance is a great game with a lot in it for a Touhou fan to enjoy. While it may sort of suffer for that same reason, expecting to be able to play such an expansive fan game with no prior knowledge isn't really the fault of the game. The addition of net play is a feature I really didn't expect to be present, but I'm glad it is, as it keeps the game way more active than it would likely otherwise be. As I mentioned before, there's quite a few Pokemon-style Touhou fan games in existence, and having played through this one, it made me want to check out some of those as well. I've already played one that I enjoyed, so I'm hoping that the next one I check out leaves me with a similar sense of satisfaction. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you during the next incident.